The answers are so confident in and of themselves that when you're looking at them, I find this, that you think, well, could I say this any better? I think it's about asking the right question and knowing that the first question isn't the end question.
What do you feel at the moment about the use of AI-generated deepfake?
A convincing deepfake doesn't need to fool everybody. What it needs to do is create uncertainty.
If there was one thing that you would want a board member or an executive or a leader of a kind to take out of this session, of this discussion we've had, what would that one thing be?
I don't think AI is a strategy. I don't think AI is necessarily value in and of itself. I think the most important thing is...
Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. Welcome to the AI Values podcast.
And I'm Edosa Odaro. Welcome.
Great to have you with us today. Now, we are this time talking to a professor. That's right, a bona fide professor, somebody who's working at the very leading edge of the development of things like NLP and AI. And she's working with students who are doing incredibly innovative stuff around different audiences, people who might well perceive and work with AI differently. Really fascinating stuff to come in this episode. I can't wait for you to meet our guest.
Indeed. And beyond that, we're going to be talking about the big impacts that AI has on the things that matter really to most people, on jobs and careers, on the future of work even, right? So really thinking about, what do we need? Do we need critical thinking? What does leadership look like? What do organizations look like? So really, really excited about this conversation.
Yeah. And one of the things that's come back in this episode is the question of ethics and the question of fairness. And particularly with somebody right at the front of this, you might be surprised to hear how important our guest this time thinks the human in the loop question is, and what we need to do to get our brains ready to think differently, to think critically about what we're putting in and what we're getting out. We're meeting Professor Julie Wall, who's a professor of AI and advanced computing at the University of West London, where she leads research in natural language processing, deepfakes, speech detection, and explainable AI. She contributes to AI standards at the British Standards Institution. She's been putting AI to work in some very interesting places, from insurance to prenatal care. And she asks a question that not enough people in her field are asking: what we're building actually fit for the world it has to operate in? So let's meet Julie right now.
Hello, Julie. It's so good to have you here. Welcome to the AI Values podcast, Julie.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Great to have you here.
Look, Julie, there's so much going on, isn't there? I mean, there's so much I want to talk to you about. I've got tons of questions and papers here, notes I've taken. I want to talk about jobs, careers, leadership, critical thinking. I want to talk about, of course, education and the tech itself. But I just feel we cannot start this without going straight to where lots of minds are right now. And that's really around the future of work. And so in this crazy world we're in at the moment, where, I don't know, it's probably something like 50% of people, over 50%, I'd say, actually using ChatGPT and all the AI tools out there regularly. But there's probably another 1 in 3, research would say, who are actually literally angry about the way things are going. And there's another, I don't know, almost half of people who are actually not so sure that the benefits actually outweigh the risk. So in this strange world we find ourselves right now, what is your best prediction about the future of work?
Big question.
Yeah.
I think it's going to become part of everyday work. And I think most people will, and many people are. I think most people will use it in some form, whether they even realize it or not. The AI skeptics, I think it's very healthy to have those, because it keeps we as a society need to keep an eye on how it's being used I think that's the most important thing. But yeah, I think it's just going to become as normal as we use Outlook and Gmail and search engines. I think it's just going to become part of every job. So routine tasks are already, but will become increasingly automated. So this could be the initial gathering of information, the preparation of documents, basic coding, all of this, I believe, will become automated. But this will allow people in their role to actually focus on the human skills. So they will focus on the problem solving, the communication, the trust, the security, the verification, validation. So it's the human role will be to look at all of this collected information, look at this code, and actually sanity check it. So our judgment becomes important. That will become the core value. And I don't think jobs are going to disappear. We've had AI is becoming a disruptor, and like previous disruptive technologies, jobs are created, but jobs will change. Some jobs may disappear, but 50 years ago we didn't have data scientists. 50 years ago we didn't have app developers. So there will be new jobs. The technology is always changing, but the jobs will change to deal with that technology.
Yeah, so Julie, look, I mean, a lot of us are wondering about that question of augmentation. Are we looking at augmenting or are we looking at replacing certain jobs? And you mentioned the coders and the data scientists. Already some of the bots are doing very, very well on that score. So you work with students every day. So rather than just thinking about plain jobs, where are the opportunities for younger people to get into the workplace?
Yeah, we are in an age of disruption. AI is, it is a disruptive technology. I think we're at the very early stages of it. So it's kind of interesting to think what's going to happen. I think we will lose jobs from a negative side, but the positive is that jobs are changing and there are new opportunities to deal with these technologies. These technologies are providing greater opportunities in business and healthcare, etc. And the human side is becoming very valuable, I would say. And so that will be, what is our identity? What do we, it's not just about how do we work, and what are our students going to be doing? What value will they provide? What is the meaning of their role? And I think it's back to AI can provide great automation. It can crunch numbers and can collect data, but it's how do we apply that? How do we understand the context of the end person, the end human, who's impacted by this, by the use case? And I think it's our critical thinking, our problem solving, the innovation that will come from the human, from our future students, our future careers, working together with the AI as a tool, and then in the future as agents that we supervise.
Yeah, there's lots in what you just said there, Julie. I mean, I'd like to come back and actually dive deeper into this piece around judgment, around, what I suppose people start to do then and how it starts to shape a new way of working. But actually, I want to come back a little bit around what you do at the moment. I mean, obviously professor computer science, you've got students actually studying computer science. So a big question around that really is those kind of broad qualifications around, computer science and the likes, is that likely to remain? Or are we starting to see a shift away from that towards, something else, a different shape of education, a different shape of what people are actually needing to study now, either in terms of what they want or what actually the market is demanding? What's your view around that? What are you seeing?
Well, we have two main aims, I think. One is that our students gain a deep understanding of their subject area, which will prepare them for a career in that area. And then the second aim will be that they can get a career in that area. So yeah, something like computer science, that's one of our flagship courses. I do think that students will still have a career in this broad discipline. And I think perhaps more than ever, actually. Technologies are always going to change. They may be changing very quickly at the moment in comparison to, history, but the fundamentals remain valuable. We teach analytical thinking, we teach problem solving. A computer science degree was never about just teaching coding. So there are huge parts of those degrees that are support a rounded individual to support more than just becoming a coder. I think understanding the technologies, understanding the systems and how they work, how they operate, how they process data, understanding how they produce outputs and what the outputs mean, I think that understanding is becoming increasingly important. And that is something that can be gained from such a university degree. And employers, I think, will need people who are not just able to run an agent or run a tool, but are actually able to evaluate it, are able to integrate it to their work processes, into the problems that they're trying to solve. So today's tools will be different in 5 years, in 10 and 15 years and beyond, but the underlying principles remain.
So Julie, look, really, really interesting. We've spoken about the younger students, but also let's not forget the rest of us who might need to retrain at the other end. Are you seeing a sort of trend in terms of people coming back to university to train in or to learn about a specific area that might complement their existing job or that might help them to retrain into a new job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even increasingly, I think people are recognizing the need to understand AI rather than just simply use it. And this is the lifelong learning piece, which is becoming essential, more and more essential. And, you know, the technology is changing so quickly, and it has in the last 5, 10, 12 years, if we go back. And our skills need continual updating, mine included. You know, I can't teach what I taught in computer science or machine learning 12 years ago. I have to update it. So as we are continuing to teach the next generation of students, existing professionals absolutely are keen to come back. And this is not just people from, you know, we have people from a software engineering background, cyber background, who want to come back and reskill or upskill, I should say. But we have people coming from healthcare and business, because AI is affecting almost every profession. Yeah. And it's not necessarily that they're all trying to become AI experts, but they're really trying to understand the change in their fields. So yeah, upskilling, retraining is, I think it's going to become more common.
It's really healthy, and probably if there's one thing that we could all do, it's to look at that actually in our careers. That would be a very useful thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the continuous learning piece is essential, isn't it? But I think one thing you raised there in terms of obviously people coming back, you know, i.e. the demand for certain types of education actually increasing from that perspective. But looking at it from the university side, from your side, is it meaning that you're now having to almost have a sharper focus now on the job market, what's happening kind of out there, how things are moving in terms of what organizations now need or what the market now needs? Is that also changing the way you're looking at education from that perspective as well?
Not really, I would say, because, well, the universities I've worked at, I'm currently at West London, we have always prepared students for work. So we've always worked with industrial advisory boards to make sure that our students have a degree that's fit for purpose. It's going to give them value. So that's always been a priority. But the priority is the same, but we have to adapt as the industry is adapting, 100%. The one thing that may be changing is that we have to think about preparing them for jobs that don't yet exist.
Yeah, right.
So the technical skills, which are hugely important, they may not be enough. So we have to think of a rounded individual who can go into the workforce, so we really support things like understanding and having skills in communication, in ethics, and of course critical thinking. So the goal is to produce graduates who have a deep understanding and skills in their subject area, who can go on and have fulfilling and promising careers, but that are also adaptable for how things are going to change in the future.
Well, Julie, great so far. Thanks for all of your answers and giving us sort of insight into the way student life is and where it may end up. But let's talk about critical thinking for a bit. And I've certainly spoken about this. It's so important that we sharpen up our instincts, our skills for critical thinking, particularly in the age of AI, where we need to understand the outputs and also what we're putting in and how that influences it. What do you feel in terms of students and what they're getting out of the AI that they're using? They're obviously designing it as well. So what are you seeing in terms of the ability of critical thinking and also the importance of it?
Yeah, critical thinking, it's a fundamental skill And it's something universities have always tried to instill in students. It's not a recent thing. It's a fundamental digital skill as well, of course. As a student, I would say that AI can be hugely helpful. It provides answers very quickly, but there is a risk of accepting the outputs of that AI uncritically. And, it's not the challenge is not about laziness at all. I think it's about over-reliance. And it's also a confidence thing. The answers are so confident in and of themselves that when you're looking at them, I find this, that you think, well, could I say this any better? But then it also puts you in a position of, oh, well, I couldn't say it better. So whether it's for content creation or for understanding something, we have to teach students and we have to teach ourselves how to verify and, probably more importantly, really challenge the outputs. Yeah, I think the critical thinking is something that, when it comes to AI, this is a critical skill that needs to be built in. Yeah.
I think from a computer science and AI kind of education standpoint, I think we can kind of see very clearly why and how that becomes even more so, for want of a better word, critical, right? But I just wonder, is this something that needs to get even broader now in terms of actually, does it need to be embedded into other kinds of education that may not have, looked at, almost preparing people for how do you interact with these generative tools, with these chatbots and things, and how do you understand the outputs and how do you challenge, etc. Is that a kind of skill that needs to go even broader than computer science, even broader than AI and the areas that you're looking at the moment, and actually into all kinds of education?
Yeah, I think across all disciplines, every discipline is facing AI generated content. True.
Yes.
And universities have always tried to teach students that there is a skill in how to evaluate material, whether that material comes from books, from research papers, or from websites. The AI generated content is new, but the same skill set should still be taught and should still be applied to this new type of content. So if we teach students that, Wikipedia is a great resource, but it's a starter for 10. It's not what we use for your dissertation. You have to go to peer-reviewed quality research literature. So we teach those skills. We have to treat AI content the same. So we have to teach students, and I think students understand that. They know that this is easily accessible content, which sounds correct, but we have to teach them to challenge that.
You're teaching your students about critical thinking and how important it is to lace that into, yes, not just in your work, but also in the wider world. And it's, the use of disinformation has been classed by some as the number one societal risk because it causes such division. So it has a wider application, but give us a little, if you could, a little narrow sense of what we can do to start to think critically. It's a mindset thing. So what do we do first of all? Do we look at what the information we put in was? Do we look at are you looking for signs of incorrect information? Just give us a quick view of what we can all do to become more critical in our thinking.
I think it's about asking the right question and knowing that the first question isn't the end question. So it's a conversation, and asking questions of yourself and of the material that is being shown to you, and reading around. So if you ask, let's say ChatGPT is the tool that's being used, that's one answer. If I'm trying to explore a new research area for me, I read many papers. So don't take the first answer that's given, even though it sounds coherent and it sounds correct. So broader reading, I think reading is hugely important. So looking at the question you're asking, looking to see if this same answer is surfacing in many different sources, and then, checking the output, making sure that you understand it. I think there are kind of a couple of stages, and it doesn't take a huge amount of time. But again, if you use something like ChatGPT and it gives you one answer, now it will also give you the evidence, the link, go and check it, and then see, can you find that same material elsewhere?
Yes, it's fascinating. I think what you're talking about there is almost like the basic sort of, research methods around, how you verify triangulation, looking at all the different perspectives and things like that. But I just wonder, because there's a lot of emphasis at the moment, isn't there, around prompting, which is really for me all about what you put in, how you ask the initial question. I think much less around how you evaluate what you get back, whether it's testing it, whether it's looking and, like you say, using research methods. How much of a balance shift do we need to have here? I mean, are you finding that people are actually able to shift from this idea that it's all about prompting to actually you need to really start to understand what you get back out?
Yeah, I think that the output is the important thing. We have great control over the prompt. So the more information we put into the prompt, of course, we're going to get it. We're providing that context to support the tool to be able to give a better response. But it's the response that we use. And and I guess it depends on the task. So if I'm using it to help me write an email, then I can check it quickly. But what if the use case is making a decision about health or credit scores or who should get a mortgage or what interest rate? So the same tool can be used for many different purposes. We need to think about how we validate for the context of the task it's being used for.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, let's talk about deepfakes and responsible AI for a second. And I want to hear about your students as well, some of the stuff they're coming up with, because there's some really interesting work you're doing. But let's talk about deepfakes, because this has been, in some ways, a core of part of your work about the use of deepfakes, responsible AI, and and its impact on us. What do you feel at the moment about the use of AI-generated deepfakes? What are your personal feelings? We'll start off there, and how important it is to really start to take critical thinking one step further into the information we're taking in our own lives.
I still think society think that deepfakes are like a meme, or maybe that's putting it too simply. They think it doesn't affect the average person. Deepfakes, they affect politicians, or they affect celebrities. And we've all seen these examples, but they're now starting to trickle down. The technology to create deepfakes is readily available. It's freely available. You could create a deepfake of somebody from, I think, seconds, a few minutes of their voice. And for people who have content online, myself included, a very good quality deepfake can be created relatively easily with little source data. So what the problem is, detecting it is, we have technical tools, and I have a great PhD student, Harry Maltby, who's working on his PhD and being able to detect deepfakes. But the wider issue, I think, is going beyond the tools to detect deepfakes, but it's public trust.
Right.
And again, you need to have an education around how do we verify. A convincing deepfake doesn't need to fool everybody. What it needs to do is create uncertainty. And it's the uncertainty where the problem is for most people. We've seen the examples of deepfakes being used against celebrities, etc. But there are now examples of deepfakes being used by regular people against other people. There was one such example of, I could give this example a few times, but a high school principal in the US, and a deepfake was created about him to be saying very controversial statements. And it turns out it was a fellow teacher in his school. So that case is now going through the courts, or it may already have finished. But when that happened, it was like, okay, this is not just something that's a meme on Instagram, but it's actually a technology which can affect us. So we need to be educated about that.
Mm. And it's fascinating. I mean, you talk a lot about, you mentioned uncertainty. I think is a big one around, really, and it cuts across a lot of things, doesn't it? Of course, we talked already about what the chatbots generate and feed back to you, but the uncertainty around images, around video, around content of all kinds, I think that's a big thing. And I think maybe it gets even more so challenging around something else that you talked about, which is really understanding that this technology is not just about, chatting on on likes of ChatGPT or Gemini. Actually, it's embedded into a lot more higher stakes applications, like you say, financial applications, health applications, defense, lethal applications of all kinds. How do we start to think, Julie, around the judgments that needs to come into how we apply some of these technologies, dependent on the kind of use case that we're thinking about?
Okay. Maybe I can talk around a use case that I was involved in. So I was involved in a piece of research a few years ago, which was looking at detecting credibility in voice patterns. And this was specifically related to the insurance domain. So we were able to create, using AI, a piece of software, a model, which would review a conversation like this, and it would look for specific things. We call them markers or features. And we were looking for certain features like uncertainty, hedging, answering a question, answering a short closed question with a long open question. So over explaining. Okay, so we can train a machine to do that. But we really have to think about, is the machine doing what we think it's doing? So what constitutes evidence that somebody is portraying these markers or these features? And are they actually portraying them in a way that means there is a lack of credibility? Or is it the way that they speak? Are they under stress in this conversation? So how reliable are the signals being used that the AI is reading and making a decision on? And then we have to think about, okay, the AI is producing an output, but who is accountable for that decision? How is that decision used? How are biases identified? Are biases mitigated? So just because something can be predicted, but doesn't mean that it should be used, and how should it be used? So I think we have to think of AI beyond just pattern matching. It does that, it does it really well, but as humans, we have to use our judgment to say, well, how do we use that output?
How important is it to think about, again, that augmentation, making sure that the systems support the human to then wiggle free the really important stuff?
Yeah, maybe I can answer this with another example. So I have another PhD student, Anna Bienkowska, and she is looking at online educational tools, specifically for neurodivergent students. Okay, so there are many educational tools available, and the majority of them are using AI models. So that models are motion recognition models, sentiment analysis models, etc. And these are being used to track engagement, attention, etc. But we have to think beyond technical performance. I don't think that is sufficient in and of itself. Such systems they must fit all of the different types of users. So we are looking specifically at neurodiversity, ADHD, ASD. Is that cohort served well by tools that are developed for a general cohort? And we think not. We think that people engage and learn differently. We think that behaviors can be interpreted differently. And so, for example, general cohort, gaze aversion may mean disengagement. But for neurodiversity, gaze aversion does not mean disengagement. So are those features or markers that are being used to detect and enable an AI to make a decision, are they right for that particular person? So it's not about the accuracy of the model, but as a performance metric, but is the model working for the people that it is applied to?
Right.
So it's about, again, that's where the responsible AI piece comes in. Are we understanding people or just measuring them?
Right.
Using AI tools. And then the impact of that is problematic.
Really fascinating example. I think it brings us to that next sort of deeper sort of sense of this, which is that, like you say, you could have AI that's technically capable. It's, it has, you develop and actually deploy that kind of capability, but actually it could actually have consequences, either ones that are right there in your face, like the kind of discussion we're having right now, or ones that are unintended. I think it's really important actually to think about that. And I wonder how, again, taking this actually away from almost education in some ways, and, obviously you're educating people for the real world. As these AI systems get deployed into the real world, what's your kind of view around how people should actually think more critically about the consequences?
I think tech companies are aware of responsible AI, and they need to be. In particular industries, they have regulations and they have compliance requirements. So they have to be responsible for the systems they're putting out there, that they are deploying into real workflows that are affecting people. And it's not an ethics piece necessarily, because ethics change globally. So it is about that responsible AI piece. The one thing that I think is most important is compliance, regulations, hugely important. And of course, companies have to work within them. But I think the human in the loop, there's two humans in the loop. One is the end user. Are we developing AI that is going to make decisions about these end users or customers or patients? And do we understand their context? Do we understand how it's going to impact them? That's hugely important. And building that into the development of an AI piece from the beginning, I think that's where we should be going. And some people are. And then, of course, the other human in the loop would be the final decision maker. So if we go back to, say, the insurance credibility piece, that would be the insurance investigator taking the input, taking the information from the AI to say, these behaviors were detected. What do you think? And then the AI, the human AI investigator, has to make a decision. So I think developing AI and then deploying it, the workflow needs to have a great understanding from the very beginning of who that end user is.
Fascinating, Julie. I think there's just so much there, and I think it's not many people are thinking about this in terms of real life implications of some of these applications and these technologies as they get embedded into everyday life and into organizational life as well. But I think, taking a step back from all this and actually looking at what's the leadership sort of question here is, we have people, and you did talk and touch on accountability, didn't you? And we have people who ultimately have to assume accountability for the outcomes of these systems, what the systems actually then produce, and the effects on people and on organizations and on society. So the question is, what if there was one thing, a single thing, as we come towards the end of this, right? If there was a single thing that you would want a board member or an executive or a leader of a kind to take out of this session, of this discussion we've had, what would that one thing be, Julie?
I don't think AI is a strategy. I don't think AI is necessarily value in and of itself. Organizations can ask about, is the AI accurate enough? Again, I don't think that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is that organizations should be prepared to use it responsibly. The value doesn't come from the technology, but it's how people are actually using it. And whether that is to increase ROI or increase number of customers, there's lots of ways it can be used. But the important thing, I feel, is how people are using AI to make better decisions. And that's where the value lies.
I agree. I mean, it's so important, isn't it, that we don't lose sight of why we're doing this. I mean, that's why we've been running this podcast, because we want to talk about the why, not just the how or the what. It's so much deeper than that. And actually, such an important technology. We have to look also at, what are we trying to achieve? What is the purpose? What values do we bring into it? And what really are the values that we're getting out of it?
We've talked so much about all the different implications here, a lot of positive things, clearly. But I think that there's so much the challenge around, the rate of change, the speed of change almost, I think is one of the big differences now, isn't there? But I'd like to come to a positive closure in this on this podcast. So can you think, Julie, of something that should make us optimistic about what's going on right now, and that people can actually look forward to, in terms of, yes, there's all these things changing, yes, there's all these challenges, yes, we need to learn working in a different sort of way, accountability changes, and all these things change. But what's that one thing that we can think about that actually should make us optimistic about the direction that we're heading at the moment?
I think we're having better conversations about AI now than we were 5 years ago. And I think that's reflected in, I see that in the students that I see every year. So every year we get new cohorts. Students are generally thoughtful, they're generally engaged. I think their awareness of ethics is increasing. I think they have opinions and experience with AI, and they have a really good insight, I think. The focus is on innovation, always from commercial side, I'd say. But I think the focus is also now more on responsible innovation. And I think that's really positive. The other thing that I'm seeing in the world of AI is interdisciplinary collaboration is growing. And I think this is fascinating and very much needed. And this goes back to the last part of our conversation, where we can't build the best AI systems if we don't think from the beginning about who that person is, who is that end user. We need interdisciplinary collaboration. As an AI scientist, as a researcher, having a team of 5, 10, 12 other AI researchers coming through from computer science is going to get me something, is going to produce something. But a team where we have social scientists, we have psychologists, we have healthcare professionals, it depends on the context of what we're trying to develop. In the requirements analysis from the very beginning, thinking about who does this apply to, I think that is growing, and I think that's hugely positive, and I have optimism about that side of things. So I think the next generation, they want to build AI, but they want to build AI that is not only capable, but that's actually going to be useful. It's going to be fair, and it's beneficial to all people involved. And the people it serves, I guess, would be a better way to say it.
Wow. What a way to come to a close. Julie, we've talked about so much here, haven't we? We've talked about careers, we've talked about jobs, we've talked about leadership, accountability, critical thinking. We've talked about, of course, the tech in itself. We've also talked about the future of work and such like. So it's been amazing. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for the amount of value you put into this. And yes, I think it's been so valuable to me, and certainly hoping it's been valuable to people listening to this as well.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So what a wonderful interview. And Julie's been at the forefront of so many of these developments for such a long time. In particular, one of my least favorite words in the universe, which is deepfakes. Whatever we want to call them now, AI-generated slop, that's okay. But I mean, this is society changing. And so what I really liked was hearing Julie's take on that, in particular, the issue around ethics. I think, we are at this point now, as I said earlier on, which is, I think ethics comes back into the systems we're talking about, because, they are very capable. They are almost thinking. And so we really have to think about the malicious use of these technologies. I think it's really important, Edosa.
It is. And I have to agree that Julie's was an incredible conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, just full of value. And I think that, I think especially given when you think about education as that thing that prepares people for careers, for the world out there, right? But it doesn't only do that for, I suppose, entry level, sort of careers, but it's all about the retrain. It's all about the cross-train. It's all about, that situation where you're trying to shift your reality into something else. And that's even more so relevant in today's world, with so much changing, where you thought you were in a career, but you have to go in and update that knowledge and that understanding of what's actually going on, or you're in a career where you wouldn't have needed to be concerned about AI or whatever else, but actually it now impacts that career. So I think it was so powerful to look at it from that viewpoint. But also I think because Julie doesn't only sit back in academia and sits in education, she's in there understanding what the market is doing, and actually what is it that students now need to actually empower them to actually be most successful in this new age of AI. So it was a fascinating conversation, I think, and I think one that'll be very valuable to a lot of people out there.
Yeah, it's right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, really just there on the front line. And yeah, I mean, it's, we all want an easy life, Edosa. Of course we do. We're ambitious, but we want an easy life. And so lifelong learning can seem like a difficult thing to do. But if we can discover the excitement about learning new things that are, yes, also relevant, that might be why we're going into it in the first place. But the excitement of that can be really infectious. So, I hope that was really useful to you. And I think I learned so much from Julie. She was fantastic. And of course, you can hear many more conversations that we've had and will have very soon at AI Values on YouTube is a place to go. You can find us all over the place on your podcast channels, but go to at AI Values and you'll find us there. And we just really want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories, your touch points with AI, what you're loving, what you're hating, what you're worried about, what you're excited about. That is what fuels our conversations.
Absolutely, I can't agree more. But also, do not forget to subscribe. And I say this because over 90% of people say they actually forget to subscribe. They get the value out of this, they forget to subscribe. But I think it goes beyond that, because I think that subscribing for a lot of people is just about, yet another notification, something that reminds you about the podcast, which might be a good thing for you. But I think it goes beyond that, because subscribing helps us keep the podcast alive. It helps us actually grow the audience, and that audience, an additional person seeing this who is a leader or decision maker, can make all the difference. So I think it's a huge thing, actually, from that perspective, of huge value to subscribe to the podcast. So if you can, do click that subscribe button, and let's grow this movement together.
Yeah, it might make all the difference. And we really hope that you enjoy the next one. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Indeed. Bye for now.